Welcome to Right on the Money, the weekly talk show with interviews you can use to help you maximize your money and optimize your financial future. Before moving forward with any of the ideas discussed on the show, always consult your financial advisor, insurance professional, or tax consultant. Looking for financial help or a second opinion? We can help you in your search. And now, your host of Right on the Money, syndicated financial columnist and money-colored commentator, Steve Savant.
Well, welcome everyone to a glimpse into the golden years of retirement. And for most Americans, you can't plan for retirement without talking about America's number one retirement plan, Social Security. And to help us understand our Social Security benefits, retirement speaker and best-selling author, Tom Hagna. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Thanks, Steve. Great to be with you.
I'm glad you're here, and I've seen your Social Security show for consumers. You also have a huge one for advisors. And I have to say, right out of the get-go, things have changed. We're talking, people, when they hear the history, they're blown away by the beginning of Social Security. Why don't we walk through that, and then we'll talk a little bit about the future solvency for it.
Yeah, so the history of Social Security is very interesting. If you really go back, the first Social Security started in Germany in 1889 with Otto von Bismarck, all right? And he set up basically an insurance-type program for seniors. The retirement age was 70, but the average lifespan was age 48, so it worked just fine. It really started in America back in 1935 during the Roosevelt administration, and this was really a response to the Great Depression because it was seniors that were hurt by the Great Depression. The real debate was, should this be an entitlement program or should this be an insurance program? Should it be welfare type or should it be where you pay in and you have your own insurance program? That was really the argument back in the 1930s. Well, the subcommittee group was headed by Secretary of Labor Frances Perkins. And I'll tell you what, if you want to do a lesson in courage, you study Frances Perkins. She pushed Social Security through at a time when women were not cabinet secretaries, okay? And this was unconstitutional. There's nothing in the Constitution about Social Security. So she not only had to push it through Congress, she had to push it through the Supreme Court. And she did. But she was working for FDR at the time. FDR wanted a program that citizens contributed based on earnings. He did not want a welfare program. He did not want an entitlement program. Citizens could take pride in collecting the benefits they had purchased, and he wanted it to be self-financing. So there should not be any government funding for Social Security. That's what he wanted, okay? Secretary of the Treasurer, Henry Morgenthau, he also wanted the insurance program. So Roosevelt wanted an insurance program. The Secretary of the Treasury wanted an insurance program. But Secretary of Labor Frances Perkins, she presented one that was more like an entitlement program. Well, Roosevelt wouldn't have anything to do with it. He said, nope, I want an insurance program. He said, modify the proposal because it's the same old welfare program under a different name. And he did not want that.
Remember, we're talking about FDR.
FDR, who's a Democrat. Right. And so Congress passed the legislation that was submitted by Roosevelt. And the initial Social Security program that was passed was this insurance program where you contributed. Tax collection started in 1937 and benefits started up in 1942. But now the Supreme Court got involved, all right, because this was unconstitutional. Could the U.S. create a mandatory old age insurance program? And here's what they found. Tax could be imposed under the taxing power of the federal government. And payments to the elderly could be justified by the power to promote the general welfare, but they couldn't be linked. So you can tax and you can help old people, but you can't tax to help old people. This was the problem. And so what happened was the Supreme Court found it constitutional, but they evaluated all the different parts separately, and they approved them separately. But the program they approved was more the entitlement program, not the one that everybody thought had passed. But see, the Americans didn't know that. They thought it was an insurance program. Roosevelt told them it was an insurance program. That's what passed the Congress, but that's not what passed the Supreme Court. So on August 15th, 1935, President Roosevelt signed the Social Security Act, and he said, we can never insure 100% of the population against 100% of the hazards and vicissitudes of life, but we have tried to frame a law which will give some measure of protection to the average citizen and to his family against the loss of a job and against poverty-ridden old age. And there you got the Social Security program, and the first person to get a check was a lady by the name of Ida Mae Fuller. Now remember, Social Security retirement age was 65. Life expectancy was 65. She lived to be age 100.
You're kidding.
No. And she paid in a total of $24.75.
All in?
All in. Her first check was $22.54, and she got paid over $22,000 on an initial contribution of $24.75.
Great rate of return.
Your Social Security won't be that generous, I promise you.
Oh, yeah.
So that was the history of Social Security.
Well, when we're talking about the history of Social Security, of course, in our day and age, I know Reagan did a lot in the 80s to kind of bolster it, kind of fortify it. But now we're heading into the future of Social Security, and there's a lot of question. People are talking about solvency. You always said that many of our old retired elderly seniors are actually taking at 62 because they fear that the solvency isn't going to be there.
Well, I say to everybody, look, Social Security will be there, all right? I could fix Social Security in less than 15 minutes for the next 100 years. I say Social Security is going to be a relatively easy fix. Medicare, Medicaid, not an easy fix, but it's going to be a relatively easy fix. And we can talk about that. Let's kind of look into this. So how does Social Security work? Well, both you and your employer pay in out of your paycheck, every paycheck, 6.2% for Social Security up to $118,500 and 1.45% each, unlimited, for Medicare, all right? A generation contributes to this Social Security fund. The fund earns interest, and a generation begins to draw from it. You collect taxes from the current generation to pay for the current benefits. So a lot of people think that they're paying in. I hear people say this, I paid into Social Security for 35 years. That's my money. No, it's not your money, okay? Your money went to pay for your parents' Social Security.
So there's no fund in a box.
There's no fund in a box that you've been paying into. You pay money, it pays for your parents' Social Security. And who's going to pay for yours? Your kids.
No, they used to have a partition between the government's actual budget and the Social Security trust fund.
Yeah, there's no more budget, all right? And there's really no more trust fund. What there is a bunch of IOUs sitting in there. The government went in there and they took the money out, and they took out $50 million. They wrote IOU $50 million. And then next year they came in and took out $100 million. They wrote IOU $100 million. So there's this box full of IOUs, but there's no money in the box, all right? Well, this all works fine as long as the working population is large compared to the retired population, or if the working population is growing, and it grew with the baby boomers and it grew with women entering the workforce. Think about it. Women back in the 20s weren't in the workforce. Well, now they're in the workforce, and so it grew, and so it worked just fine. But now the baby boom generation is getting older, they're living longer, and so the ratio of workers to retirees is dropping rapidly and will continue to drop. So back in the 40s, there were 42 people working for every person who was retired. Well, that's now down to 2.9, and it's going to go even lower, 2.1, Steve, when you're drawing your Social Security benefits. There's only going to be 2 people paying your benefit.
Could this be one of the reasons why, even from a political standpoint, we're letting immigration, we're letting people in here just to pay for this?
Yeah. So I say on this slide, what this slide tells you is one of two things. Either women need to have more babies,
right,
or we need to have more immigration. That's what that's telling you. You need more younger people in the workforce to pay for the retirees. Japan is in a huge problem because they don't allow immigration, right? And they have an aging population and no babies being born. They're in a huge problem.
Right, so the original 65 age, hardly everybody was dying before that when they invented this, and it was 40 plus Americans for every one worker.
Right.
So the theory was right back in the day, but we changed the rules of engagement. The stats changed.
Right. It worked fine. When life expectancy was 65, the retirement age could be 65. But now what's life expectancy? 80, 85, and we raised it to 67? Obviously, the retirement age is going to have to go up at some point.
Well, when I'm looking at this now, so from a solvency point of view, your biggest futuristic look, your prediction, is basically we're going to have it. It's just that the benefits aren't going to be the same as what we're enjoying today.
Right. Let's look at, you mentioned Ronald Reagan. Back in 1983, Ronald Reagan, Republican, worked with Tip O'Neill, Democrat, and they fixed Social Security for a generation. What did they do? They raised the retirement age from 65 to 67.
I don't remember anybody revolting on that.
No, and because, look, the reason is because it was both parties. You see, the Republicans can't fix Social Security and the Democrats can't fix Social Security. They got to do it together because otherwise they're going to say, oh, look what they did. Oh, look what they did. Oh, they're trying to cut you. They're trying to hurt you. And it's all this political sniping back and forth. They got to come out. Here's the answer. But we're basically going to have to raise the retirement age. Not on you, Steve, but on your kids. Cost of living is probably going to have to be lower and slower. It's going to be anyway because we're going to be in a more deflationary economy. and we probably got to raise the limit on taxes from 118,500 maybe to 150, 160,000. We're going to have to do some things that aren't going to make Republicans happy. They're not going to make Democrats happy, but we got to do it for Americans. Now, Bernie Sanders says, lift the cap altogether, just tax those billionaires, on Social Security. But is it really fair to have somebody pay $200, $500, $20 million to get a $25,000 benefit when they retired? That's not fair either. So somewhere in between is the right answer. We got to raise the retirement age of the kids. We've got to, raise that cap a little bit on taxes, I think, and I think we can fix it for the next 100 years.
Well, remember, if you're listening to our show on radio, iTunes, or a podcast, you can view the video version online at rightonthemoneyshow.com and request information from this segment. In our second segment, we're going to talk about the last year's changes in Social Security. Pretty dramatic. We'll be right back after the break.
For more information on this week's money topics, just go to our website at www.rightonthemoneyshow.com and follow Steve's daily postings on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. When it comes to retirement, money management, small business, insurance coverage, college funding, or budgeting, we have the interviews you can use.